The silence of space was suddenly broken by a strange signal. It was faint at first, a mere whisper, but as it grew stronger, the galaxy's most advanced radar systems picked it up. Something was out there. A ship, but not like any other that had been seen before. The alert was sent out immediately. Across the galaxy, military command centers buzzed with activity as analysts and officers scrambled to identify the source of the signal. This was not a known alien species. There was no record of any ship like it. The unknown vessel's presence in the sector sent shockwaves through the alien military alliances. The galaxy was peaceful, and this was unsettling. The warship that appeared on the radar was large, much larger than anything the aliens had encountered. It had a sleek, dark design, unlike the traditional bulky and heavy ships that the various species used for battle. The ship's surface shimmered with energy, as if it was alive, constantly shifting with ripples of power. This was not just a simple ship. It was something more. Alien scouts were dispatched immediately, attempting to get a closer look. As they approached, their systems started glitching. Their communications scrambled. The unknown ship was blocking all frequencies, preventing them from getting any clear readings. The aliens attempted to send a communication. No response. It was as though the ship itself had chosen to ignore their presence. At first, it seemed like an error, a mistake. Perhaps the ship was malfunctioning or had lost its way. But the longer they watched, the more they realized something else was at play. The warship wasn't drifting aimlessly. It was headed in a direct path toward the heart of alien-controlled space. Why was it here? That was the question running through every command center. Who was inside? And why was it heading directly toward them? Then, the ship made its move. It didn't announce its intentions. It didn't open fire. It simply continued its journey, getting closer and closer to the core systems of the galaxy. The tension in the air was palpable. No one knew whether this was the beginning of an invasion or a diplomatic message. The ship moved with purpose, calm, controlled, yet terrifying. And still, there was no communication, no explanation, no clue to its purpose. Was it here to conquer? To explore? Or was it something far worse? In a quiet command center on the far edge of alien space, a senior officer named Vraxer stared at the ship on his screen. His eyes narrowed. This isn't right. We've never seen anything like it. He turned to his team, his voice sharp. Prepare the fleet. We may be facing an enemy we cannot understand. As Vraxer issued orders, the warship continued its advance. It was now only hours away from the heart of their territory. The rest of the galaxy watched, gripped with fear and curiosity. No one knew what would happen next. And then, without warning, a burst of energy shot from the unknown ship. It was fast, powerful, and unmistakable. The blast hit an uninhabited moon in the sector, completely obliterating it in an instant. The galaxy had been watching. Now, they were all asking the same question. Who are these humans? And what do they want? The galaxy was now on edge. The mysterious human warship had just destroyed an entire moon, without warning or explanation. The impact was felt across the galaxy, not just because of the destruction, but because of what it implied. Humanity had returned, but they were no longer the fragile species the galaxy had once known. Alien command centers were in a frenzy, with leaders across various species desperately trying to understand what was happening. They had thought humanity had been wiped out centuries ago in a great war. Now this unknown warship, with its incredible power, was a stark reminder of how much they had underestimated humanity. In a secure command room aboard the flagship of the Alien Council fleet, Supreme Commander Vraxer convened with his top generals. They were facing an unprecedented situation. "This is impossible," Vraxer muttered as he watched the display of the warship's destruction. The moon's wreckage was floating in space, a testament to the warship's power. Humans were nothing but a distant memory. How could they have developed such technology? His chief strategist, General Zor, spoke up. There is no way a single ship could have that kind of firepower. We believe this is only a scout. They must have a fleet waiting for orders. We need to prepare for a full-scale invasion." Vraxer frowned, tapping his claws nervously on the table. He had fought in wars before, but this felt different. This wasn't just a random attack. This was calculated. The humans were not here by accident. "We need to send a message," Vraxer ordered, turning toward his communications officer. "Contact their ship. Demand an explanation." The officer hesitated, glancing nervously at the screen. "Sir, we've been attempting to establish communication for hours. No response." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll force a response. Prepare the fleet. We're going to approach and force them to communicate." With that, the Council fleet, composed of several massive ships, moved forward to intercept the human warship. The fleet was large, heavily armed, and led by the most experienced commanders in the galaxy. They were confident in their superiority, or so they thought. Meanwhile, aboard the human warship, the crew was calm. Captain David Markson stood in the bridge, overseeing the activity of the ship. His expression was cold, calculating. He had spent years preparing for this moment, the moment when humanity would reassert its dominance in the galaxy. The time for hiding was over. The ship's weapons were primed, its shields were strong, and the crew was ready. "Captain, we have multiple alien ships approaching," reported Lieutenant Harris, his voice steady despite the growing tension. "They've locked onto our position and are signaling for a response." Markson didn't flinch. "Ignore their communications. Let them come." Harris looked at him, concerned. "Sir, should we prepare to engage them?" Markson smiled slightly. "They haven't even seen what we're capable of yet. Hold position." The warship remained stationary, despite the alien fleet approaching rapidly. As the alien ships closed in, their massive size and aggressive posture made it clear they weren't here for peace. They were here to confront humanity, to understand why their long-lost enemies had returned with such devastating force. Back in the alien command center, Vraxer watched as his fleet drew closer to the warship. His generals were tense. They had never faced anything like this before. Their ships were designed for warfare, but this human vessel, it didn't seem to be afraid. "Prepare to fire a warning shot," Vraxer ordered, his voice strained. "Let them know we are in charge here." The alien fleet opened fire, sending a series of energy blasts toward the human warship. The shots hit their target, but the warship's shields absorbed the blasts without so much as a tremor. Vraxer's eyes widened. "What?" Before he could finish his sentence, the human warship retaliated. With a deafening roar, a single beam of blue energy shot from its cannons. It collided with the lead alien ship, obliterating it in an instant. There was no warning, no chance to escape. The ship was gone, reduced to nothing but debris floating in space. The alien fleet froze in shock. The humans had just destroyed one of their largest ships without breaking a sweat. Markson's voice echoed over the comms. "This is humanity. Do not mistake our silence for weakness. We have come to reclaim what is ours. Leave this sector or face the consequences." For a moment, no one spoke. The aliens had never seen anything like this before. They were used to being the conquerors, the ones who dictated the terms of war. But this was something else. Finally, Vraxer spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Retreat. All ships, retreat now." But it was too late. The humans had already proven they weren't to be underestimated. Their message had been clear. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy would soon understand just how dangerous they had become. The alien fleet retreated in disarray, with the shock of the human warship's devastating attack still fresh in their minds. The galaxy had never seen such a display of power, especially not from humanity. Yet, as the remnants of the alien ships disappeared into the distance, the question remained: why had humanity returned? What were they after? Aboard the human warship, Captain David Markson stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the stars ahead. The crew around him worked efficiently, almost mechanically, as they monitored every sensor and every communication signal. They had just made their first major statement to the galaxy, and the message had been clear. "Captain, the aliens are pulling back, as expected," Lieutenant Harris said, glancing up from his station. "It seems the message has been received loud and clear." Markson nodded, but there was no smile on his face. "This is just the beginning. We need to find out who else is in this sector and how much influence the aliens still hold." He turned his attention to the ship's tactical officer, Commander Alicia Hart. "Status on the galaxy's response." Hart turned to her console, her expression unreadable. "The communications network is in full swing. Word of the attack is already spreading through the galaxy. Some alien factions are calling it a provocation. Others are already mobilizing forces to confront us. We're expected to be the target of a united alien front." The silence in the room grew heavier as everyone took in the reality of the situation. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. Markson took a slow breath, then spoke with quiet authority. "We don't just want to survive. We're here to take what's ours. It's time to make the galaxy understand that humanity is back, not as a weak species, but as a force to be reckoned with." Elsewhere in the galaxy's various alien empires, all of whom had once believed that humanity had been extinguished during the last Great War, were now scrambling to understand the new threat that had emerged from the darkness of space. The Diraxian Empire, the galaxy's most powerful and feared force, convened in a council meeting to discuss the shocking events. "Impossible," General Zor, the supreme leader of the Diraxian military, muttered as he stared at the display of the human warship's attack. How could humanity have possibly rebuilt such advanced technology? Their species was scattered, destroyed. The head of the Diraxian Council, Empress Krilla, raised a hand, silencing the room. She, too, was unsettled by what had transpired, but unlike the others, she refused to show fear. Instead, she exuded confidence. "We've been careless, all of us. Underestimating humanity was our mistake, and now we must correct it. They cannot be allowed to claim what is ours." "Shall we prepare our forces for battle, Empress?" General Zor asked, his voice heavy with tension. Krilla's eyes narrowed. "No, not yet. First, we learn exactly what we're up against. We must understand the human warship's capabilities. Our fleet alone might not be enough to take them down." Back on the human warship, Captain Markson sat alone in his quarters, staring at a star map on his screen. The ship had made its way deeper into the sector, and they were now approaching what was known as the Border Worlds, a region considered neutral, where many smaller factions and independent colonies had settled. These planets were rich in resources, but also in potential allies. The goal was clear: establish a foothold in the galaxy, recruit new allies, and prepare for what was coming. Humanity had been absent for far too long, but now they would rebuild their empire, not as an underdog, but as a conqueror. "Sir, we have an incoming transmission," Lieutenant Harris called from the comm station. Markson looked up. "From whom?" "A small independent colony in the Border Worlds," Harris replied. "They're requesting a meeting." The captain raised an eyebrow. It wasn't unusual for colonies to reach out, but this one was different. They were clearly in a position of weakness, surrounded by larger, more powerful factions. They had nothing to lose by reaching out to humanity. "Put it through," Markson said. The screen flickered to life, revealing a middle-aged man with short, graying hair and a worried expression. "Captain Markson," he said quickly, his voice shaking. "I'm Governor Keegan of the colony Theros 7. We've heard about what happened. The destruction of the Diraxian ship. I don't know if we can survive without your help." Markson leaned forward slightly. "Governor Keegan, what exactly do you need from us?" "We need protection," Keegan said, his eyes darting nervously. "Our colony is under constant threat from larger alien factions. We've been ignored for years, but after your attack, We realize you might be the only chance we have. We want to form an alliance with humanity, if you'll have us. We offer resources, ships, anything you need to help your cause." Markson sat back, considering. This was unexpected. An offer of alliance from one of the smallest colonies in the galaxy, humanity's first ally in their return to the stars. But what did they have to offer in return? More importantly, would this alliance be enough to shift the balance in humanity's favor? After a pause, Markson spoke. "Governor, we'll send a representative to Theros 7. If you're serious about an alliance, we'll discuss terms. But understand this, humanity does not give its trust lightly. If you want our protection, you must prove your loyalty. You won't get a second chance." Elsewhere, in the Deep Space Command Center of the Directions, Empress Krilla's message was clear. Humanity's sudden reemergence was not just a fluke. This was no isolated warship. The galaxy was about to feel the full weight of humanity's return, and the Diraxian Empire would not stand idly by. "We've underestimated them before," Krilla declared. "Now we face the consequences." The Diraxians began preparing their forces. The galaxy was entering a new era, an era where humanity was no longer an afterthought, but a looming threat, one that was ready to take back what had been lost. The galaxy was now teetering on the edge of chaos. Humanity's sudden reappearance, backed by overwhelming power, had shaken the very foundations of the universe. The aliens who had once considered themselves the dominant forces in the galaxy now faced the terrifying possibility that they had underestimated humanity's capabilities. Aboard the human warship, Captain Markson stood on the bridge, his gaze focused on the data screens before him. The ship was now making its way toward a heavily contested sector, the edge of the border worlds, where independent factions and smaller empires struggled to survive. But Markson knew that this was more than just a strategic move. This was a statement. Humanity was no longer a footnote in the galaxy's history. They were a power, and the galaxy would have to reckon with them. It was time to find allies, expand their influence, and prepare for what was to come. "Lieutenant Harris, any updates on the colony?" Markson asked, his tone calm but urgent. "Governor Keegan's team has prepared for our arrival," Harris replied. "They've sent the coordinates to their primary colony ship. They're ready for our envoy." Markson nodded. "Prepare a team for the meeting. We need to make sure they're committed to this alliance. No more half measures." The human envoy. Within hours, a small fleet of human ships, including an envoy vessel, set course for Theros 7, the colony that had reached out for help. As the ships entered the sector, the humans began to feel the full weight of their decision. This wasn't just about survival. This was about re-establishing humanity's place in the galaxy. On board the envoy ship, Markson's trusted lieutenant Alicia Hart stood at the helm. Her thoughts were sharp as she surveyed the surroundings. The colony was small, but it was important. A successful alliance with Theros 7 could open doors to more colonies in the region, and possibly even some of the more neutral factions in the galaxy. "We need to show strength," Hart said, looking over her shoulder at her fellow officers. "This is more than just a diplomatic mission. If we want them to believe in humanity's power, we need to prove it." As the ships neared the colony, the scene on the surface of Theros 7 was peaceful. The planet's surface was dotted with sprawling cities and lush green fields. Yet, despite its beauty, it was clear that the colony was struggling. Its people had lived under constant threat from larger, more powerful alien factions, and the attack on the Diraxian ship had only heightened their fear. The meeting with Theros 7. Governor Keegan and his team greeted the human envoy as the ship landed at the colony's spaceport. Markson and Hart disembarked, flanked by a small security team. Keegan, a middle-aged man with a tired but determined expression, met them at the foot of the ship's ramp. "Captain Markson, thank you for coming," Keegan said, extending his hand. "We've heard stories, rumors about what happened. But seeing you here, I can't help but wonder, can humanity truly stand up to the galaxy's power?" Markson shook his hand firmly. We're not here to simply survive, Governor. We're here to claim what is rightfully ours. And we're going to need allies to do that. Your people, your resources, they could be invaluable to our cause." Keegan glanced around nervously, as though wondering if there was something more Markson wasn't saying. "You're asking us to commit to something bigger than we are." Markson's voice grew harder, more determined. "Your survival is tied to ours now. You have nothing to lose. Join us, and we'll make sure you not only survive but thrive." Hart added, "We're not asking for blind loyalty. We're offering protection and a share of the power we're about to seize. We'll stand together, or you'll stand alone against the galaxy." Governor Keegan hesitated, but after a long moment, he spoke. "You have our support," he said finally. "We'll help you, whatever it takes. You've proven yourself already, and we believe humanity is a force that can change the galaxy." The alliance was forged. Humanity had just gained its first true ally. The road ahead would be fraught with danger, but Markson was confident. With Theros 7 by their side, they would be able to take on the galaxy's mightiest powers. In the Diraxian Empire. The Diraxian Empire, shaken by humanity's sudden return, had been in turmoil since the destruction of their flagship. They were scrambling to formulate a response, but despite their best efforts, nothing had been able to shift the balance. The humans were growing in power, and they had already started to form alliances. Empress Krilla paced in her war room, her thoughts sharp as she examined the situation. The loss of their ship and the humiliating retreat had made the Diraxians appear weak to the rest of the galaxy. They could not afford to show any further signs of weakness. "We can't let this go," Krilla said, her voice cold. "The humans must be eliminated before they gain any more power." General Zor, standing at her side, nodded. "We'll need more than just our fleet. We'll need to bring in every available resource. Our spies have reported that humanity is forging alliances with the smaller factions. We cannot allow them to grow stronger." Krilla clenched her fists. "Prepare the fleet. We're going to take the fight to humanity. We'll crush them before they can fully unite." But even as she spoke, she knew that the galaxy had already changed. Humanity was no longer the forgotten species on the fringes of space. They had risen, and they would not be so easily defeated. On the border worlds, word of humanity's alliance with Theros 7 quickly spread throughout the border worlds. Some colonies saw an opportunity to align themselves with the rising power, while others chose to remain neutral. It was clear that humanity's return was no longer a mystery. It was a reality that could not be ignored. But as more colonies pledged their support, the galaxy's larger powers, including the Diraxians, began to view humanity as a true threat. And in the shadows, unknown factions began to move, watching the growing tensions and preparing to strike. The galaxy was a powder keg, waiting for a single spark to ignite an all-out war. Humanity's re-emergence had thrown everything into chaos. Their sudden display of power, the alliances they were forging, and their unwavering determination had rattled the most powerful factions in the galaxy. The Diraxians were preparing for war, but humanity had already started gathering allies, and their reach was spreading far and wide. Aboard the human warship, Captain David Markson stood at the helm of his warship, staring out at the stars ahead. The decision had been made. Humanity wasn't going to just survive in this galaxy. They were going to thrive. And the galaxy, for better or worse, was going to have to learn to live with them. "Captain," Lieutenant Harris reported, "we've received communications from several independent colonies. They want to join us, to form a coalition. The word is spreading fast. Humanity's message has resonated with those who have been under the heel of the galaxy's ruling powers." Markson nodded. "Excellent. Prepare the fleet for expansion. We need to meet with these colonies and show them what we're capable of." He turned to Commander Alicia Hart, who was overseeing tactical operations. "What's the status on Diraxian movements?" Hart's face was tense. "The Diraxians are preparing a large-scale fleet. We believe they are gathering at the edge of the Korath system. It seems they want to hit us hard, with everything they've got. But they're still hesitant. They know they can't underestimate us again. Markson clenched his jaw. The Directions were the galaxy's greatest military power, but they were also arrogant, and that arrogance had cost them dearly. They will come, and when they do, we'll be ready. But right now, we need to grow stronger. The more allies we can gather, the better our position will be. In the Direction Empire, Empress Krilla sat in her war room, her fingers drumming on the surface of the cold metal table. The images of the human warship's destruction still haunted her, but she knew that this wasn't just about one ship. Humanity was building something much larger, and that couldn't be allowed to continue. We cannot let this go unchallenged, Krilla said, her voice low and dangerous. The galaxy needs to understand that we are the true power here, and anyone who thinks otherwise will be crushed. General Zor, always the tactician, spoke carefully. We have forces ready, but we must consider the other factions. There are more than just humans and the Directions in this galaxy. If we attack without thinking, we risk entering neutral colonies and inviting unnecessary wars on multiple fronts. Krilla's eyes narrowed, but she understood. Then we will strike fast and hard. We'll force humanity's hand, and the galaxy will have no choice but to follow our lead. But we need to move now, before they become an unstoppable force. The border worlds. As humanity's influence grew, more and more colonies pledged allegiance to Captain Markson's leadership. The smaller factions, who had long been oppressed by larger empires, saw in humanity a chance for freedom, a chance to have a voice in the galaxy's future. On the lush, green planet of Altaris 9, representatives from several independent systems gathered in secret. They had heard of humanity's rise, and many saw it as a beacon of hope. Governor Alara, a shrewd leader with a reputation for survival, addressed the group. Humanity is making waves across the galaxy. They've shown strength, and they're starting to gather power. If we're going to survive what's coming, we need to decide now. Do we stand with them, or do we try to remain neutral and risk being crushed under the weight of the larger empires? I'm not sure we have much of a choice, one of the other representatives said. The Directions are already preparing for war. If we don't take a side, we might be caught in the middle. Governor Alara looked around the table. Then it's settled. We send word to Captain Markson. We will stand with humanity, but on one condition. We need to ensure that our voice is heard, that we're not just another number in their growing coalition. As the representatives agreed to send the message, they understood the gravity of their decision. Aligning with humanity was risky, but it was a risk they were willing to take. The Directions would come for them, but together with humanity, they had a chance. Back on the human warship, as Markson prepared to receive the delegation from Altaris 9, he was interrupted by a sudden alert. The ship's sensors had detected multiple ships on an intercept course. Harris, what's going on? Markson asked. Captain, it's the Directions, Harris replied, his voice tight with urgency. They're here. They've crossed into the Korath system. Their fleet is massive. There's no mistake. They're coming for us. Markson's mind raced, but he didn't show it. He had anticipated this. The Directions wouldn't let humanity's rise go unanswered. Put out a fleet-wide alert, Markson ordered. Prepare for battle. This is the moment we've been preparing for. We're not just going to fight. We're going to make them regret ever thinking they could wipe us out. The crew moved with practiced precision, gathering at their stations. Markson's mind was clear now, focused. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. The Directions had pushed them too far, and now it was time to show them the cost of underestimating humanity's strength. The Direction Fleet. As the Direction Fleet moved into position, Empress Krilla stood on the bridge of her flagship, eyes fixed on the battle ahead. The fleet had been prepared for this moment, and she knew it would be decisive. We strike now, Krilla commanded. Our target is clear, humanity's warship. If we destroy them, we destroy their momentum. The galaxy will see their weakness and fall in line. General Zor looked out across the massive fleet, his mind already working through the battle's potential outcomes. He knew the humans had powerful weapons, but the Directions had numbers and experience. This would be a decisive fight, a fight that would determine the future of the galaxy. The silence of space was broken by the hum of engines and the rising tension aboard humanity's warships. Captain David Markson stood in front of the main holographic map of the Korath system, his face lit by the glow of the display. The Direction fleet was coming, and the time for diplomacy was over. It was time for war. Aboard the human warship, the human fleet was ready. Markson stood at the helm, his crew at their stations, all eyes focused on the incoming threat. This would be the first real test of humanity's might since their re-emergence. The Direction fleet was far larger, and their ships were more advanced. But humanity had something the Directions didn't: resolve. "Commander Hart, what's the status on our defense systems?" Markson asked, his voice steady. "All systems are online, Captain," Hart replied. "We've calculated their approach. We'll have the advantage of terrain when they enter the Korath system. The asteroid field will provide some cover, but we need to move quickly once they're in range." Markson nodded. "Good. We won't be able to avoid them forever. We fight, and we show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." Hart looked at him with resolve in her eyes. "Understood, Captain." The Direction fleet. Meanwhile, on the Direction flagship, Empress Krilla stood tall, her expression cold and calculating. She gazed out at the stars, her mind focused on the imminent battle. They had waited long enough, and humanity had become a problem they could no longer ignore. "Ready the fleet for attack," she commanded sharply. "We'll show them that they're no match for the might of the Direction Empire. This ends today." General Zor, standing beside her, spoke with grim determination. "We've gathered enough forces to overwhelm them. Once we destroy their warships, we'll crush their hopes of ever rising again." Krilla turned to him, her eyes steely. "Do not underestimate them. The humans have surprised us before. We'll finish this quickly, but we must be thorough." The Direction fleet moved into position, massive warships in tight formation, ready to unleash their devastating firepower. The first shots would decide everything. The battle for the future of the galaxy was about to begin. The first clash. As the Direction ships entered the Korath system, Markson gave the order. "All ships, prepare for battle. Engage on my command." A tense silence fell over the bridge as the crew took their positions. Markson's heart pounded in his chest, but his face remained calm. This was it, humanity's first true test. The ships were locked and loaded, and the crew was ready to fight for their place in the galaxy. "Fire," Markson commanded. In an instant, humanity's fleet opened fire, their weapons lighting up the void of space. The Direction ships retaliated with overwhelming firepower. The sheer size and power of their fleet made humanity's ships seem like mere specks in the vastness of space. Yet the humans fought with every ounce of their strength, determined to hold their ground. The battle was chaotic. Explosions lit up the sky as the two fleets clashed, both sides trading shots, each trying to find an opening. The human ships, though smaller, were far more nimble, using the asteroid field to their advantage. Their strategy was simple: avoid direct confrontation with the larger Direction ships and hit them from unexpected angles. "Keep them moving," Markson barked to his tactical team. "Use the asteroids to break their formations. Stay mobile." The human fleet split into smaller groups, darting between the massive asteroids, using the terrain as cover. It wasn't a perfect strategy, but it was working. The Directions, powerful as they were, couldn't keep up with the unpredictable movements of the human ships. The turning point. After several hours of intense fighting, the Direction fleet began to falter. Humanity's tactics had caught them off guard. The humans weren't fighting for survival. They were fighting for something greater. They were fighting for their future. But then, the unexpected happened. A Direction dreadnought, the largest ship in their fleet, broke through the asteroid field, its massive cannons aimed directly at Markson's flagship. "Brace for impact," Hart yelled, her voice filled with urgency. A deafening roar echoed through the warship as the first volley of the dreadnought's energy cannon struck, shaking the ship to its core. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the lights flickered. The shields were holding, but just barely. "We can't take another hit like that," Hart shouted. "Our shields are failing." Markson's eyes narrowed. He knew what had to be done. The time for retreat was over. It was time to end this. "Target their engines," Markson ordered. "All ships, focus fire on the dreadnought's propulsion. We disable them, or we die trying." The final assault. The human fleet gathered all its remaining firepower and concentrated it on the Diraxian dreadnought. For several minutes, the massive ship absorbed hit after hit, its shields flaring brightly. Then, with a final, decisive shot, the human fleet struck at the dreadnought's engines. The ship's massive form shuddered, and then, nothing. It was dead in space, its massive hull drifting, now a target for humanity's remaining forces. Markson stood firm, his eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding around him. The battle wasn't over, but humanity had dealt a critical blow. The Diraxians, once certain of their victory, were now fighting to maintain their position in the galaxy. The Diraxian retreat. As the dreadnought drifted, Empress Krilla stood, her fury barely contained. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had crippled her most powerful ship. The realization dawned on her like a cold wave. Humanity was no longer a simple nuisance. They were a force to be reckoned with. "Withdraw," Krilla commanded, her voice sharp with anger. "We will regroup and reconsider our strategy. Humanity's rise cannot be stopped, but it can be delayed." The Diraxian fleet, battered and broken, began to pull back, retreating from the battlefield. The humans had won the first major victory. After the battle, aboard the human warship, the crew erupted into cheers as the retreating Diraxian fleet vanished from sensors. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had held its ground. And in doing so, they had delivered a crushing blow to the galaxy's most powerful empire. Markson stood in silence, watching the stars in front of him. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had proven itself, but this was only the beginning. "We've sent a message," Markson said quietly. "Now we wait for the rest of the galaxy to hear it." The battle was over, but the consequences were just beginning. Humanity's first true victory had sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The Diraxians, beaten but not broken, had retreated, licking their wounds. But the rest of the galaxy was watching, and many were now questioning their assumptions about humanity. Were the humans just an anomaly, or had they become something far more dangerous? Aboard the human warship, Captain Markson stood on the bridge, gazing out at the stars, his mind racing. The fleet had won. The Diraxian dreadnought had been destroyed, and their forces had been driven back. But the war was far from over. He knew that the galaxy wasn't going to forgive humanity for challenging the status quo. The Diraxians would regroup, but it wasn't just them. The ruling factions of the galaxy, the Arcturians, the Tyleran Dominion, and the Syndicate of Vox, all had their eyes on humanity now. They would be forced to pick sides, and Markson was aware that it wouldn't be long before they tried to crush humanity under their collective heel. "Commander Hart," Markson said, turning to his tactical officer, "what's the status on our fleet?" "We've lost a few ships, but the fleet is holding strong, Captain. Our weapons are fully operational. We've got reinforcements on the way. And we're receiving messages from several of the colonies who want to join us," Hart reported, her voice calm but with an undercurrent of excitement. Markson nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. "Good. We need to show the galaxy we're not just survivors. We're a new power, and we're not afraid to fight for our future." Hart hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "There's something else, Captain. We've been receiving encrypted transmissions from some of the neutral factions. They want a meeting, a summit of sorts. They say they're interested in an alliance, but we need to decide whether we're ready to engage diplomatically." Markson took a deep breath. This was the moment. Humanity had been fighting for survival, but now it was time to shift gears. They couldn't just be a resistance force anymore. They had to become a power that could not only fight but shape the future of the galaxy. "Set up the meeting," Markson ordered. "Let's see what they have to offer. But we need to make one thing clear to them. This is no longer about survival. This is about establishing our place in the galaxy. We're not just another faction. We are humanity, and we'll be treated as equals, or we'll fight to make it happen." The Galactic Summit. The summit was held in the neutral sector of space, an unclaimed region far from the influence of any major faction. Representatives from the neutral colonies, smaller factions, and even a few rogue factions gathered in a massive floating conference hall, the scale of which was intimidating in its own right. Markson arrived with a small delegation of his most trusted officers. He stood tall as he entered the hall, his crew by his side. The representatives from other factions eyed him warily, some with curiosity, others with open disdain. Humanity had made enemies, and now they had to navigate the web of alliances, all while trying to avoid being crushed. At the center of the room stood a towering figure, Alara, the governor of Alturas 9. She was the one who had first reached out to Markson after the battle and had helped broker the summit. "Welcome, Captain Markson." Alara greeted him, her voice firm but respectful. "I'm glad you accepted the invitation. The galaxy is in turmoil, and your presence here signals a new era." Markson extended his hand. "Thank you for bringing us together. Humanity has been pushed to the brink for too long. But we've learned from our struggles. We're not just survivors anymore. We're a force, and we're ready to take our place in the galaxy." A representative from the Arcturians, an ancient and powerful species, scoffed from the other side of the room. "Humanity is bold. I'll give them that. But you've only just begun to understand the galaxy's true power. Do you really think you can challenge us? Do you think you can challenge the directions?" Markson didn't flinch. "You can think what you want. But the truth is, we've already shown that we're not to be underestimated. We've already fought the directions and won. And we won't stop until we secure a future where we have a voice." The turning point. As the summit continued, representatives from several factions began to shift in their attitude toward humanity. The Arcturians remained skeptical, but the Tyloran Dominion, a massive collective of planets known for their political savvy, had begun to show interest. Their leader, a calculating strategist named Director Venner, spoke up. "Perhaps there is more to humanity than we originally thought," Venner said, his voice smooth but thoughtful. "The Directions are not invincible, and their failure in battle has rattled them. It is clear that your people are willing to do what others won't, fight for your place, regardless of the odds." Markson nodded. "That's right, and we won't be the last to rise up. More factions will join us. It's just a matter of time." Venner exchanged a glance with his aides, then turned back to Markson. "I propose a deal. Humanity joins us in a new coalition, one that can challenge the old powers. The Diraxians may have the most firepower, but they've lost their momentum. It's time for a shift in the balance of power." The price of power. As the negotiations continued, Markson understood the gravity of the choices before him. Humanity could no longer be a fringe player in the galaxy. They had to become a power to be reckoned with, and that meant making deals, even if those deals came with a price. The galaxy would not accept humanity's rise without resistance, but Markson was prepared to face whatever challenges came next. And yet, a part of him remained wary. What did these factions truly want? And what were they willing to sacrifice in the pursuit of power? He knew one thing for certain. Humanity had only just begun. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but it was a path they had earned the right to walk.